I didn't know it was in there. I would be.
And they never had it.
Lisa said, there's cream in here. Well, I've been drinking coffee this whole time.
For me, that's my favorite because it's the Starbucks white chocolate mocha.
I tried it last week. Oh, it boxed up. Last week.
Here's a good trivia
very
question
good.
for everybody. Did you guys know that at Starbucks, 65% of all the drinks they sell are the white chocolate mocha?
I believe it.
That's 65% too many.
Let's see. Hey, just statistics. Preach it back there.
That's my favorite.
I said that's 65% too many.
Anybody's interested in following along in their phone with the slides, instead of trying to zoom in up here, if you're old, you can just shoot the QR code, it's on your phone, throwing that out there. Boy, I tell you. You know a funny thing? Here's a funny thing. I didn't know this. You just do that, that's fancy.
I just changed it so it could work.
I didn't know this, but I actually thought that it involved like a lot of work. But like if you're like in a browser, you just click create QR code, it's like right there. It's like one click. Yeah, I didn't know that. But anyway, that's Technology Minute. You know, we started off there. Speaking of technology. Just a joke. Anyway. No, actually, Tara and I, we went out yesterday, we worked all day, and I told her, I mean, she is a very hard worker. She was working all day long. She's trying to keep up with me. She didn't make it, but she did pretty good. You know? See how I turned that around? I thought it was going to be nice. But,
Well, it's not break time yet.
What time are you gonna eat?
I will say, it was about 12:30, and I said, it's 12:30, time to eat, you know? That's me checking the sun.
I'm gonna tell you, you gotta feed him, because if he gets
Oh,
hungry.
I know, gosh. I
I
know.
know that.
He gets angry.
At the office, it'll be
No,
like
he's
10
like
o'clock,
2:30.
and I'm like, dude, you not eat breakfast, you gotta go eat something, or you go home.
It's true. It's true. It's like whenever breakfast was, if it wears off, it's time.
Put fuel in that tank.
That's right. My brain requires something, nutrients. Very funny. All right, so we'll start off with a couple announcements. We've got one cool announcement, which I'm gonna put on the screen, didn't do. But one cool announcement is we've got some T-shirts that I had ordered through. That I had ordered through High Tech Signs. They were super cool. Oh, come on. See, here we were giving me the okay. Is that right? Cut off full screen. Just up here talking. All right. We got some shirts made for the class. We have black and white. I shared a thing in the little group thing, but I'll get something fancier up here for the screen next time. Tracy has the sign-up forms. High Tech Signs is making them. It's the black with the cool colors, and it's got the QR code on the back. You shoot it, it goes to our Facebook page. Pretty cool. Pretty cool idea. I stole it. Huh?
What does it say?
On the back?
No.
Oh, Koinonia, the name of our class.
Say that again.
This is a transliteration. Anyway, what do you mean? Well, this is a transliteration. These are Greek letters. You guys don't speak Greek, so that's why it looks different.
She wants you to pronounce it.
Pronounce it again.
Koinonia.
Koinonia.
Yeah. If you want to be more Greek about it, it's like koinonia. But I mean, in the South, that's as close as we get. You know?
I've been here 2.5 years, and that's the first time I've ever heard him say that.
Yeah, that's right. Koinonia. Koinonia. Anyway, that's the name of our class. It means it's Acts 2:42. It's this perfect fellowship, fellowship, loving each other. I got some Acts 2:42 here. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to koinonia, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And it's kind of like this Christian perfect atmosphere, I think is a good way of looking at it. That's what when we come to church, we should have koinonia with one another, you know?
Fellowship of brothers and sisters.
That's right. We're just brothers. Anyway, was peaceful. It was a peaceful time. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So anyway, our shirts are it's a fancy tri-blend shirt. It's very nice. We've got the sign-up sheet over there if you're interested. Get with Tracy. One other quick announcement, which I started next week. 50 days after the Passover is Pentecost. This year for Pentecost, we have a special guest. Scott McCarley's coming to do the lesson. So go ahead and put that on your calendars. May 19th. Mark your calendars. That's good. 50 days after Passover. But it's not, Passover's already happened. So anyway, one thing that I wanted us to pray about, we've kind of talked about it in our Facebook Messenger group a little bit, is we were kind of talking about the idea of an opportunity to have a sponsorship as a group. And I kind of wanted to bring that up. Maybe we'll have like a video up here next week or something to kind of talk about it more. An excellent Christian standard verse to go by is John 13:34. A new command I give you, love one another as I've loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. That's an excellent verse for us to try to apply to our own lives. And one of the ways we can do that is helping the less fortunate. A couple different options that have been brought up in different things was World Vision, which is I think probably the most popular, most standard one. World Vision International goes and they go into all kinds of different third world countries and provide water and resources and different things to different kids. And it's kind of like, just a small summary, is kind of like you have this one child that you or our group as a whole would sponsor, and it's through, let's just say like a $30-40 a month, which would be like $1.50 each a week or something. I don't know what it is, but it's a very small amount that we could do as a group, throughout the year, and it's just another way of bringing us together as we're trying to reach others. It's a global Christian humanitarian organization empowering people out of poverty. Another one, which has a local missionary here in Rome that Lacey's friends with, is Akote Adeki Ministries, which is another ministry. But one of the things of their group is, whereas World Vision, I think it's like 83% go directly to who you this one's like 100. So that's a pretty good. It's like funded outside of your sponsorships. So all of the sponsorship money goes directly to your child, which is a cool one. That's good. Their slogan is to share the love and truth of Jesus Christ through discipleship, relationship, and by empowering people and uplifting communities in Uganda. So it is specific to Uganda. But the guy, I forgot his name, Johnson. He's a local guy, and he's like the missionary over there. So pretty cool. I just want you guys to keep in prayer of that. It's something to think about. Moving on. We'll discuss those more as we continue on, and we'll see if that's something that we want to do or not. In our NLT Scripture Journals, I think we're on page 55 still. Pretty sure. Same page since last time we saw Christy Dabbs. No, I'm just kidding. Previously in Judges, we've worked our way through chapter 1. We've worked our way through the first chapter of the prologue. And today we're going to complete the prologue, which is, pretty good. Let's see. But the prologue is this bridge between Joshua and Judges. And it brings us up, it catches us up, and it gives all these different views and all these different interpretations on the events that happened. I always feel like another thing is it's a good introduction of the overall characters. The map of characters, the setting, whatever you want to say. It prologues to the actual events. But we started with the military report of the conquest, and then in chapter 2, we talked about God's interpretation of that military report. And we had the envoy of Yahweh come, the angel of the Lord. He comes on the scene, and we discussed what a complicated figure he is. I will say I didn't get anything last week, but does anybody have any thoughts on the discussion of the angel of the Lord for you? I'm just gonna rest 5 seconds. We'll see if anybody says it. But I do feel like I do feel like it is a very complicated issue to grasp. You know, the angel of the Lord, who is he? His role is pretty well defined. He is the messenger, the mouthpiece of God. But is he a prophet? Is he an angel, a unique angel, a unique spiritual being? As this messenger, is he a Christophany? Is he Jesus Christ pre-incarnate? Or is he just a form of God himself? You know, it's a very wide range of views that are how to interpret the angel of the Lord. So we'll move on from him, but he goes up. He's over there beside Jericho. He goes up to Bethel. He delivers a message. He said, God has done all these things for you. He's faithful to you. He followed you. He's protected you. Told you can't make any covenants with the Canaanites. Why are you doing this? I love that. That's an excellent summary of what he said. Like, what is wrong with you people? I love that. I'm no longer going to drive them out. If this is what you've chosen, then that's what's going to happen. There are going to be thorns in your sides. There'll be traps. There'll be snares to you. You'll always be tempted by their ways. It's an excellent summary. And they named the name of that place Bokim, which means weeping. They named that place weeping in the present tense. They wept aloud. They offered sacrifices to God, so we would take out of that they are repenting. You know, oh no, the angel of the Lord's laid all this on us, so we obviously have to change our ways, or so it would seem. You know, it seems as if they're going to repent at that point. They're torn between God's way and the Canaanite way. And then following that, we went into the author's interpretation of the military report. He says back when Joshua was alive, man, things were great. The Israelites served the Lord. They remembered all the things that he had done for them. And then that generation dies, and here you guys are. He doesn't say it quite like that, but he does talk about this apostasy of the Israelites. He lays it out in verses 11 through 13. He says, the Israelites did the evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They went after other gods, worshiping the gods of the people around them, and they angered the Lord. They abandoned the Lord to serve Baal and the images of Ashtoreth. So we discussed the evil last week, which is such an excellent Old Testament term to come to grips with. The Young's literal translation of verse 11 is, and the sons of Israel do the evil thing in the eyes of Jehovah and serve him to Balaam. But there is an article before the word evil there, and it is this specific, not this generalized evil that we commonly talk about. This is the evil. This is the evil that is laid out in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and all throughout the Old Testament. It's a particular evil. And the evil is the abandonment of God. The replacement of the worship of God with other gods. And that's specifically what it means. Just in those 3 verses alone, he gives 4 different examples of here they are abandoning, here they are abandoning, here they are following others, here they are worshiping and bowing down to others. The Jewish word there we talked about is prostrating themselves to these other gods. They bow down to their superior in submission, in homage. All that I am is lower than you. You are greater than me. It is an excellent way of the way they use the word worship there. And then verses 11 through 13 also, I'm all about the chiasms. I love those. They're done for specific reasons. We talked about them when we went through grasping God's word and how they're somewhat poetic, but they're always done from the author's point of view to highlight something. We start with the least important on the outside, and we have these parallel verses, and as we reach the inside, we have this main theme that the whole thing focuses on. And 11 through 13 has that same thing. It starts and ends with they served the Baals, they abandoned Yahweh, and then in the middle there's the evil of they pursued other gods and they worshiped them. And we discussed Baal a little bit. We'll continue to talk about him as we go on. But he's the storm god. He's holding a lightning bolt in one hand and can't hold thunder. What else is he holding? He's holding I was going to say thunderbolt. That's not right. A lightning bolt and some other storm thing, some rain. No, he's not rain. But he is the storm god. You know, he is in control of the weather. So if harvest time's coming, we better talk to Baal, and he's gonna hook us up with that. He's also the male fertility god. Anytime you see a depiction of him, it's always dealing with fertility, and he'll always have exaggerated characteristics. That's the G-rated version of talking about that. But he's all about that. So, but this is what they're doing. They are pursuing these other gods. They're worshiping these other gods, and that's the state that they're in. Who? The group after Joshua. The group that didn't see this. They didn't witness all this stuff. And this made the Lord burn with anger against Israel. Verse 14. The Hebrew idiom there is Yeharap, which is a very complicated one for me, but it so makes sense. So it reminds me of getting a fever, but it means his nose burned. And for the Hebrews, it's just a saying. You know, it's very similar to us. He kicked the bucket. What does kicking the bucket have anything to do with death? It doesn't even make any sense. But for me, when I'm getting mad and my nose is burning, I do feel like this flushness. You know, it's like coming over me. You know, like, better calm down. You know, no. But like, it kind of reminds me of like you're doing something and all of a sudden you're getting fever. You know, and like, oh, my face is hot. Oh gosh, you know. But like,
kind of hot flashes.
just to prepare me. That's probably right. It means he's angry though, which is similar to a hot flash. I think a hot flash brings on some anger. His nose was hot against him. That's a good one. His nose burned. It's a super common saying. I'm sure maybe you've already heard it. But it's 146 times in the Old Testament, 7 times in the book of Judges. It's a very common, phrase that they use. I can't think of a more common phrase that we use that doesn't make any sense, but man, we have a lot of them. That's the situation. So today, God reacts. Will he react with justice, or will he react with grace? I think that's our question. So we'll open with prayer, and then we'll get into it. Dear Lord, we just thank you so much for bringing us here this morning. We ask that you open our minds as we study your word this morning. Allow the Holy Spirit to guide us in all truth. Help us to see what you're revealing to us. Challenge and change us. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. So, this morning we are going to be, we're going to start in verse 16. We're in chapter 2, verse 16, if you're following along in your Bible. And we'll read the first few verses there, and then we'll finish up the chapter after that. But the title of this in our NLT translations is "The Lord Rescues His People," which is a good one. I will even say this, just to go ahead and cover myself for the next couple of months when we're in the book of Judges. Anytime I say that the judges themselves saved Israel, that is not what I mean. It is God saved Israel through these terrible judges. So just keep that in mind. In case I ever say that again, the name of this, the title of this section is named very well. The Lord rescues his people. So in verse 16, then the Lord raised up judges to rescue the Israelites from their attackers. Yet Israel did not listen to the judges, but prostituted themselves by worshiping other gods. How quickly they turned away from the path of their ancestors, who had walked in obedience to the Lord's commands. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge over Israel, he was with that judge and rescued the people from their enemies throughout the judge's lifetime. For the Lord took pity on his people, who were burdened by oppression and suffering. But when the judge died, the people returned to their corrupt ways, behaving worse than those who had lived before them. They went after other gods, serving and worshiping them, and they refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. So the Lord burned with anger against Israel. He said, "Because these people have violated my covenant, which I made with their ancestors, and have ignored my commands, I will no longer drive out the nations that Joshua left unconquered when he died. I did this to test Israel, to see whether or not they would follow the ways of the Lord as their ancestors did. That is why the Lord left those nations in place. He did not quickly drive them out or allow Joshua to conquer them all. So much going on here. So, there's right there at the beginning, we start with God's compassion. We see his reaction. He responds to the evil by taking pity on them. Verse 18 in the NLT, I really like, the Lord took pity on his people. He feels sorry for them. He could have reacted in all kinds of different ways. But when they're in trouble, when God's people are in trouble and they cry out to him, whenever they make groanings, whenever they make themselves known to him, he responds with compassion. Throughout the Old Testament, especially throughout Judges, we'll see it time and time again. And even if you look at that section right there as a summary of the entire book, I mean, it really is. It covers the whole thing. And each time they end up being worse off than they were before, and they go even further. And then here he comes, and he's got another judge, and then it goes further. Once that time is over, it's just the cycle, which we'll just continue to talk about, of downward spiraling. So verse 16 says, "Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders." So he raises up these judges, these chieftains, these saviors who saved them. We talked about how the word judge itself is it doesn't translate well in today's world. When we think of judges, we think of a man with a gavel. He's got the black coat on, Judge Joe, and he's passing his judgment on you. That is not the role of these guys. These guys are redeemers. They're deliverers. I like rescuers even. That's a pretty good word. But they rescue them out of the hands of their enemies. They are given a title. They are given a position. Even if you wanted to call them a governor, I think a governor for us works a lot better than a judge. In today's society in the United States, a judge really doesn't have the going out on behalf of the people. He's more like he's stationary. It's just a lot different. So don't even think of them as judges at all. And look at them as they're heroes, and they're redeemers. It's very good. They're going to redeem their tribe, their groups. If there's ever a place in the book of Judges where anything good happens to them, it's grace. They never earn it. I think that's a very important thing to remember the whole time. God could judge them the entire time over and over. Every other chapter, they're just getting more mess and more mess. And when he reacts, it's nothing that they did. It's never earned. And then we have their response here. How they responded to God's compassion. He gives them grace. He saves them. They refuse to listen to the deliverers. They play the harlot after other gods. They pay homage to other gods. They react God's model for their fathers, and they reject the will of God. So in that one part, he lays out like 5 or 6 different ways in which they respond, and all of them are horrible. None of them are what we feel like we would do. I think that's a good way to look at it, because we feel like we would be, oh man, we can clearly see this is God saving us, so we would react appropriately. But man, would we? That's a good question. And so this starts what we're going to label as one of the cycles. We're getting into it here. We can see the Israelites will be in this continuous cycles, continuously downward as they spiral further and further away from God. This cycle will be completed at least 6 times in the book of Judges. We could argue for 2 more, but we'll discuss it as we keep going. But in each cycle, they will have a different redeemer who is trying to save the nation. And we'll see the results. But his motive is always that the Israelites will return back to it. That's God's motive. That's the judge's motive, is to bring them back to God. This section is really God's interpretation of Israel's performance in chapter 1. And when we get to verse 20, very interesting thing happens. We have someone who's speaking. Is this God himself, or is this the angel of the Lord? It's a good, here's the words of the Lord. Because these people have violated my covenant, which I made with their ancestors, and have ignored my commands, I will no longer drive out the nations that Joshua left unconquered when he died. I did this to test Israel, to see whether or not they would follow the ways of the Lord as their ancestors did. So this is God's speech. But as we talked about, anytime you're reading an ancient book, an ancient record, when someone speaks, they can be speaking on behalf of, So, Scott's sons can speak on behalf of Scott, especially if he sends them off. They can deliver the message of Scott. So in this instance, man, there's so many I did this and I did that. But there also is at the beginning of the chapter when the angel of the Lord is speaking. So is the angel of the Lord continuing that conversation here, or is this God himself? It's a good question. I'll let you interpret that one yourself. But this is someone speaking on behalf of God. I think that's okay to say. He starts with this accusation. The people have broken the covenant. They have not listened to God, and God has warned them. I think one of the unique things of Judges and the evil is it has been laid out since the Exodus all the way through. This is what's going to happen. We're going to get there, and you guys are going to fall if you don't, if you're not with me. Exodus 19, verse 4 says, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. For all the earth belongs to me, and you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. This is the message you must give to the people of Israel." So the whole time he's had this special purpose for this group. And so many times what we want to do is we want to apply the words that God says to the Israelites, especially in these situations. And we're going to go to it in the second half of what we're going to read today as well, to us. And one thing is, yes, you can apply a lot of the truths of what God says to them to us, But don't look at it like every single word he says has to also apply to me. I think you're kind of reading into it a little bit incorrectly there. So keep in mind, as we especially get into the second half, he's speaking to a specific people at a specific time for a specific, we don't have the Amalekites to the left of us and the Philistines to the right. We're not in that situation. So are we surrounded by evil? Yes. So we can't take a general point out of this, but to try to apply every single word in all this to every single situation that we have is very difficult. He has a specific plan for them at a specific time, and he wants them to be his particular group, So, not saying he doesn't want you to be in his particular group, not saying that, but it's just something to keep in mind. I think don't try to apply the whole thing just so broadly. It is a very specific message. And then we have God's reaction to what they did in verse 21. "I will no longer drive out the nations, the Canaanites. I'm going to leave them there." Verse 22, "I will use them to test Israel and see whether they will keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their ancestors did." So it sets up this entire scene. If you're going to do that, I'm no longer going to save you from all these people. They will be there. They will tempt you. This will happen. And it does. One excellent word, which I've used a couple times already without giving the definition for it, is apostasy. Apostasy is this leaving. It is this knowledge of and still going away from. I really like the way that it can apply to a lot of different things. I even like to look at it like we know what works and we still chose to take a shortcut. I kind of like that. We put it in our own minds and I came up with another way of doing things rather than the way that I know works. That you've apostatized yourself from that position. But in religion, It's a renunciation. It is a total, I'm not doing that anymore, although I know that that's God. You've abandoned that belief. So they will suffer the consequences of their apostasy, of their leaving God, which is, again, laid out over and over in the Old Testament. Leviticus 26 is one of the most personal, where he's speaking directly to, Moses and Aaron. He's saying this is what's going to happen. Leviticus 26, here's a couple of verses. Do not make idols, or set up carved images, or sacred pillars, or sculpted stones in your land so that you may worship them. I am the Lord your God. I will fulfill my covenant with you. I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt so that you would no longer be their slaves. I broke the yoke of slavery from your neck so you can walk with your heads held high. However, if you do not listen to me, obey all these commands, if you break my covenant by rejecting my decrees, treating my regulations with contempt and refusing to obey my commands, I will punish you. I will bring sudden terrors upon you, wasting disease and burning fevers that will cause your eyes to fail and your life to ebb away. Already I'd be thinking, well, I'm not doing any of those things. You will plant your crops in vain because your enemies will eat them. I will turn against you, and you will be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will rule over you, and you will run even when there is no one chasing you. That's a pretty good one right there. And if in spite of all this, you still obey me, I will punish you 7 times over for your sins. I will break your proud spirit by making the skies as unyielding as iron and the earth as hard as bronze. All your work will be for nothing, for your land will yield no crops, and your trees will bear no fruit. You will die among the foreign nations and be devoured in the land of your enemies. Those of you who survive will waste away in your enemies' lands because of their sins and their sins of their ancestors. But at last, my people will confess their sins and the sins of their ancestors for betraying me and being hostile towards me. When I've turned their hostility back on them and brought them to the land of their enemies, then at last their stubborn hearts will be humbled and they will pay for their sins. These are the decrees, the regulations, and the instructions that the Lord gave through Moses on Mount Sinai as evidence of the relationship between himself and the Israelites. We only have love letters in our culture. We don't have strict obedience letters. We don't even get that. When we read through the Psalms and we have these personal, all these feelings attached to these things, we don't understand like the impregnable, Psalms where it's full of anger and all these other sides. It's both sides of the coin in Hebrew, though. You can have this. This is somewhat of a poetic message or a very personal letter, but yet it is a stern warning. It is not this, hey, I love you guys, we're going to get along. No matter what you do, I'm going to take care of you. It is not that. It is, I will punish you. That's the name of that chapter. It is love, though. It's very hard for us to get, though, but it is the same love that you explain to your child why they can't run across the street. If you run across the street, bad things will happen. You have to look both ways. Hello. It is this stern, you've got your arms around them at the same time you're about to spank them. But like, I will punish you because I know what's better for you. Oh man, that's good. Tough love. That's good.
Kind of like this will hurt me more than it does you.
That's actually just a lie. I've said that one before, and I was thinking probably not true, but that's fine. No, it is tough love. It is love, though. It's just hard for us to grasp. If Israel becomes apostate, then the Lord will send in these oppressors, which will cause them to groan to him. And then he responds and he rescues them. That is the cycle. When the book of Judges was written, before I go into chapter 3 here, because there's a couple, we're going to cover those first 6 verses. When the book of Judges was written, I think think it's very important to know this just in Bible 101. There were no chapters and verses. Chapters and verses are far later. The book of Judges was written on a scroll as one book. The layout of the chapters doesn't happen until 1250 BC. So like 2,300 years later, they come up with this idea of breaking it up into chapters. And then later on, they decide they're going to break it up into verses. Now, all these things are excellent ideas. You know what I'm saying? Excellent ideas. It's so much easier to find, like the middle of Jeremiah, when when it's all broken up for you. This is Jeremiah 26, because Jeremiah is long. Sure, your question has more words in it than any other Bible book. But anyway, it's arguably the longest. It does have the most chapters, but it has the most words. 33,000 words, I think. But if you're looking for the middle of Jeremiah, or a specific place in Jeremiah, it's very difficult. If you have chapters, it helps. It helps everything about it. Hey, have you read Psalm 28, for example? The one after the other one that's, it is very, another thing to keep in mind is the headings. All of our headings are very man-made, far later than the Bible, Are they pretty good sometimes? I love most of them. I love to go to the NIV or the NLT and see the different headings, excellent little summaries of this section. But all those are added much later than the text itself. And I think that's something to keep in mind. About 1550, Stephanus, he's the one who finalized the verses. And since then, there are some issues with some of them working right. I think that's an okay thing to look at. Are they perfect? I think is a good way to look at it. No. Are they holy? No. God doesn't say you better memorize Joshua 24:6. No, it's not like it. He says, do you remember when it is said this? Have you not read when this happens? That's the ancient way of reading the Bible. In our more modern sense, we have these specific passages that are we've titled it the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 7, wherever. All that being said, in some cases, the verse division it doesn't work as well. It's hard to understand how they came up with that, and in some cases, the chapter divisions don't make any sense either. And this is one of those cases. Any Bible scholar, anybody who's wrote a Judges commentary will end the prologue in chapter 3, verse 6. So those first 6 verses should be in chapter 2. I think I said all that just to get to that. But for your notes, the prologue is chapter 1:1 through 3:6. That is the prologue. So those last 6 verses is that testing that we just then talked about. Here he's saying, I will test them, and here's the test. More about the consequences of apostasy is a good title for it. But I'll read those first 6 verses. These are the nations that the Lord left in the land to test those Israelites who had not experienced the wars of Canaan. He did this to teach warfare to generations of Israelites who had no experience in battle. These are the nations, the Philistines, those living under the 5 Philistine rulers, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites living in the mountains of Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath. These people were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the commands the Lord had given their ancestors through Moses, the exact same ones we just read in Leviticus 26. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and Jebusites, and they intermarried with them. Israelites' sons married their daughters, and Israelite daughters were given in marriage to their sons, and the Israelites served their gods. So, as you can clearly see, just in the context of that, like we are still in the previous chapter. It is very easy to see that, especially when you see the next verse and this huge transition that verse 3 should have, or chapter 3 should have, starting with verse 7, which we're going to get to next week. But we have this discussion here of the test itself. He talks about the nature, the purpose, and then the results. The nature really is who's the subject of the testing. he lays it out there. It's the Israelites who didn't participate in the conquest of Canaan. It is that next group. It's the next generation. As time passes, the generations, they pass away, and then you have another generation who weren't involved, and that's the people that we're here, that we're with here. We're talking about that next generation. Joshua and all his generation, all the ones who remember all those great things that God did for us all the way here, they're all gone. Here we are with these spoiled brats. No, I'm just kidding. Here we are with these Israelites who have not experienced God acting on their behalf, this firsthand eyewitness of miracles and things. It's very hard for me to believe, because when the last, I would call it a natural miracle, but as they crossed the Jordan splits just as that happened in Egypt. It's another miracle that's performed as they're crossing over. So that generation who saw that event would obviously be astounded. And I know, God, really, I was at that river this one time, and you wouldn't believe this, but I could see the ground on both sides. Like those people with that eyewitness evidence are gone. And so God tests them. Who does God use to carry out this test? These different groups that he's placed there. Man, that's a crazier scene when you think of things like that. It immediately relates to any of the wars that we've known in the last 100, 200, 300 years, and how God is in charge of all the nations. God is in charge of everything that's going on. And so when these different nations war with each other, there's a much larger purpose than what we can see, which is probably very similar to the Israelites in this case. They didn't see this as well. They didn't see the things that are happening around them the same way that we do. But it names out the Philistines, which is the first mention of the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites. And one thing to note about the Philistines, and we'll talk about it much more when we get into Samson, is they're not Canaanites. They're a whole different people group. I like to look at them like they look different. I don't know if you want to say they're lighter, darker skin. They have light hair, dark hair, whatever you want to say. They all have mustaches. That's fine. But in some way, however you want to hold them different, they're all giants. That's fine too. However you want to look at the Philistines, they're different. They come to the land much later. They're not related to those people. And then we have the term all the Canaanites, which includes everyone, all the tribes that are against them from all sides that we name out over time and time again. For us, it's just these lists of people that we're unfamiliar with at this point. But they're all against them. And it lists these three other people groups, not Canaanites. Here's a quick verse, Amos 9:7. Is where the first mention of the Philistines is. For Amos, it says, are you Israelites more important to me than the Ethiopians? Asked the Lord. I brought Israel out of Egypt, but I also brought the Philistines from Crete and led the Armenians out of Kir. So here we see they're from the sea. Crete, a small island out in the Mediterranean Sea. That's where the Philistines are from. And God here tells Amos that he put them there. That's pretty cool wording for me. But they've been brought into the land as a part of God's plan. They came in from the sea. We talked about three of the cities that have already been taken or conquested as we work through chapter 1. But one last note on the list: the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites. It's like this genius layout of southwest, southeast, northeast, and northwest. It's this circling of them in that order. That's the way that this is laid. This is like laid out geographically of the opposing forces from each side. So one thing to gather out of that is the author has this knowledge of the geography at the time, which he lays out for us over and over and over. But in this instance, he definitely does. As he's talking about the test. To test the people's fidelity to God, to test whether they would obey and follow his commands. the commands that were revealed through Moses. Because we pretty much, read all the important ones, but they're repeated and repeated and repeated. You think they have them down by now. But will they keep my covenant in a more prophetic way? Will they hear my voice? And then the results. It goes all the way to list the results. They settled among the Canaanites. They intermarried, and they served other gods. They've completely forgotten where God laid out all these plans for them. Deuteronomy 7. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you're about to enter and occupy, he will clear away many nations ahead of you. The Hittites, names all these different groups. The 7 nations who are greater and more numerous than you. When the Lord your God hands these nations over to you and you conquer them, you must completely destroy them. Make no treaties with them and show them no mercy. You must not intermarry with them. Do not let your daughters and sons marry their sons and daughters, for they will lead your children away from me to worship other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will burn against you. He will quickly destroy you. This is what you must do. You must break down their pagan altars and shatter their sacred pillars, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn their idols. So many times we have the same language, which is then followed through by the people he's speaking to. It's so sad. Here we have this. We have different people groups all in the same place, which is very interesting. But we have this ethnic integration, but also it leads to the spiritual integration, which is the main point. In our modern minds, I feel like we have this. When we read this text, we have this hope for everyone. We have this. We argue, well, if we leave them in the land, maybe we can convert them. It's a good way to look at it, Well, I mean, they're not all going to be bad, What about, Tiny Tim? He's a good one, You thought Tiny? I didn't mean the singer. Tiny Tim like the Charles Dickens. Anyway, what about Cousin Jethro or whoever? He's not bad, He is. His ways are not God's ways, and here we are again trying to impose our modern setting to what's going on here. These people groups are different than the ones that we're pretending they are in our head. It's much different than that. We are not going to convert them. God says, if you don't do what I say, they will convert you, and that's the beginning and end of that. We look at it like they're going to see the faith of Israel and they're going to convert. They're going to learn about Yahweh and His ways and they'll convert. That is not the case. I think it's different now. I think that it's different in a lot of different ways. Yes, I think all the things that He's saying to them, you must be circumcised to set yourself apart. That is completely not the case in our world. When He says you're not to intermarry with them, it's not the case in our world. The thing that happens there is, we find out even through way later on with Solomon, is as he goes off and he marries all these women from all these different places, they bring their culture in, And not to say that in a modern sense you wouldn't be mixing different cultures, but not in the same way as this. This is the opposite of God. This entire lifestyle has to do with these pagan gods and their Asherah poles and all these things that He lays out, which are not a part of our world. We don't have any relationship to people who have totem poles in their yard. We don't even understand that, I don't know. I always look at those people who have those stars. Now, if you have a star on the side of your house, I don't really know what it means. I'm just talking here. But some people have the big star on the side of their house. You guys got one of those? You guys are looking at each other. You got one. I know you're going to ask. I kind of look at that. It's like, I look at it and I'm like, hey, what's even up with the star on the side of the house thing? I don't know. Some people have big ones and small ones. But anyway, it must mean something. But I kind of look at that like, okay, it's just a fancy.
It's like Americana.
Yeah.
Okay. I pretend in my head that it's some kind of meaning. They're in this group, It's not a pentagram. That would make it more obvious to me. But like in this thing, yeah, it's got the pineapple on the porch. Moving on. We're in a whole other category. In these days, they have these poles. They have these different, altars and images of their gods all around their house. That is their house, here's another general speaking. I don't know if anybody else has this. I'm not looking at anybody. But like if I were to go into somebody's house and I were to see in their living room they have like 8 dream catchers up, I'd be like, okay. A dream catcher is like a Native American catches dreams. I don't know. But like I'd already be thinking their cultural understanding of things is a little different than mine. You know, if I were to marry the lady who has the dream catchers, am I going to affect her? Is she going to affect me?
You were the dream.
No.
She doesn't call me. Sorry.
I mean,
Now,
but-
don't need them.
Yeah, but isn't it kind of similar to the way we are today? Because, I mean, we're being told that, you know, if you don't accept all of these other cultures or beliefs and stuff like that, that we're the problem.
It is similar in the fact that other people are different. But this is a specific time. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind, you know, because so many people can read this and they can be offended by, you know, what's this here, not to intermarry. You know, I'm applying that to myself in a modern sense, or 200 years ago, or 300 years ago, my great-grandfather married, you know, somebody from Russia or Africa or wherever. Oh gosh, you know, I must be in this. No, that's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about these specific people right here. They're not to intermarry with these specific people right here. That is exactly what's going on here. We can try to take that and apply it in a modern sense, but that is not the author's intent. He is talking to these people, you know. So that's all I wanted to. I think that was pretty laid out there. But this whole scene has been specifically laid out by God. He is the director of this scene. He's put all the people in place. They're in the land that He wants, and now He's testing them. That is a pretty good one. This is not applicable to every single people group in every single situation, to every other people group all around the world. So just throwing that out there. And another thing to throw out there, just a whole everybody is good on the inside type of mentality. These people cannot be converted to Yahweh. I think that's another thing to look at. These are the enemies of God. Once you get that in your head, I even think the battles are even easier to pay attention to and to not cringe at in our modern setting. From this point on, if they survive, they're going to survive by grace. If Yahweh responds and rescues the people in the episodes that follow, it's entirely mercy. Any favor from God is mercy. If they survive, it's by grace. And that grace is always unmerited with the Israelites because they are terrible at making decisions. So, will that fix the problem? What's going to happen next? Next week, we're going to start the meat of the book. It's the group of stories. The next 13 chapters are the group of stories about the saviors, about the judges. And it's much more of a narrative of following each individual story, and we're going to break them down and we'll examine them. Next week is the best. You know, as we understand the book of Judges is a downward slope, we start off with the best judge, the hero of heroes, Othniel. And we'll open with him next week. He's our first deliverer in the deliverer account. Very good. So anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts on any of the information covered? Okay.
So the judges were already in a position of authority. So I'm just like, if the Israelites had like, they know to automatically trust what this person is saying and to follow what they're doing. Like, you know, maybe already have Andy in front of you to do what Andy's doing. So,
Andy had the
like,
option.
you know, like in this world, then how would that person stand out as nobody?
This is an excellent question. And my first answer, the theological answer is because they have the Spirit of the Lord. And I think it sets them apart. You know, I think that we can come in here and we can all use persuasive language to talk each other into things. But when somebody talks and God's talking through them, it works. You know what I'm saying? I think their authority is seen. But no, they're just brought up randomly is a good way of looking at it. And I think most of them, Gideon, for example, he's nothing before God comes to him. You know, they're just normal goofballs just like us, And all of a sudden, they start talking and everything different. Now, Samson's a little different than that, but most of them are somewhat just normal people, and then God comes and works. And it's just like anybody else in the Bible, you know. I think he uses the absolute craziest people you'd never ever expect, you know. Yeah. So, that's a good question. That's good. Sometimes though, I don't want you to look at them like even like they're leaders, even because they don't really like. I mean, some of them do lead, but they're here to rescue us. They're here to save us. Fun. No, that's good. Anybody else? Somebody else have any thoughts on? You can't apply every word, every verse in the Bible to yourself. It's good. That's a good way to look at it. In some ways, we're kind of taught that when we're young, you know. And I can just go. In my vision, I saw what appeared to be a throne of. Hold on, I didn't have a vision. What kind of vision is this? Like, what's going on here? You know, it's very dangerous to try to apply every verse to ourselves in our own lives. Ezekiel's vision, the Lord gives glory, he leaves the temple. It's very difficult, you know. So, moving on. We'll have a quick prayer. Does anybody have any prayer requests or praise reports?
Remember Jeff this week, he's having his heart undone Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Pray for one of my employees that has stage 4 cancer. He's going for his 4th and last chemo treatment this week. He's not well. Didn't look very promising.
Pray for my stepbaby. He's got dementia.
All right, we'll pray real quick. Scott, you want to pray for us?
Lord, thanks for this day. Lord, thank you for Wes and his commitment to study, Lord, and bringing these lessons to us this week. Lord, I thank you for it. I pray, Lord, that you'd help us to understand what you tried to show us and reveal things to us and the truth that you have us to understand and know. And Lord, I pray for all these requests that have been made. Lord, you know the circumstance and each situation. And God, I just pray that your will be done for each. And Lord, I pray you go with us in the service, bless the music, bless the sermon. God, I pray if anyone's here today that doesn't know you, I pray that we get saved before they leave today, Lord.